Welcome, everyone! I'm celebrating St. Patrick's Day. That's today, right?
No, you just want to get drunk today.
Oh, that's what it is. That's what it is.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
and I like to wear beads and hold flamingos. Cheers to everyone out there. I will be going out this Friday, so I figured I'd just get started now. So anyways, I see you're now just Nick. How are you doing, sir?
Doing good. I actually have an Intellivision question today because I'm working on a video, and I was trying to figure out what the first RTS was. And Utopia came up as one that's at least a distant relative, but I can't figure out if it's truly real time, or if it's turn-based or a hybrid.
It's real time. It's kind of like there's a timer going, and you're kind of fishing to get points and obviously to feed your village, and you're building. It's like the first God game, kind of Sim Earth type game, or Sim like.
It reminds me more Sim City than it does like an RTS. I mean, it's got RTS elements, but it reminds me more of Sim City.
Yeah, it's kind of, we'll have to play it. I'll have to show you, or I might be able to fire one up, but it's kind of weird to do it as one player. It's best to do two, but yeah, you basically there's two islands, and you're kind of I gotta take these things off.
I get the basic gist of it.
Yeah,
but I think my confusion comes into like the turns, because you can set it for a number of turns, and I'm like, okay, so that means it's turn based, but it looks like there's real time elements, but there's turns, and I'm like, what the hell is it?
I have to go back to it. Now, I'm going to be honest, although I do like it playing it afterwards, as a kid, I never had that growing up. So I kind of got into it a little bit more later on, but I've never sat down and really had a big head-to-head with anybody. But I do, and to be honest, mostly from when I was doing the songs for the album, Utopia was one of the songs. I'm like, well, I need to learn this game. So that's how I found out, like, kind of what it was about. Rabs in the house.
Right, because next week's moment in gaming history is the first RTS, and it was kind of down between Utopia and one other game, and I leaned more towards the other game because it seemed more like everything was happening in real time, and there was more active combat. Because my criteria had a couple of things, right? To kind of go into spoilers for a little bit before we get on topic. Is one, it had to be real time. Two, there had to be some form of resource gathering and like resource trading in it. A way to build more units and build more buildings, and some form of conflict, be it being able to build an army or being able to do diplomacy, right? So those were the main criteria I was going for out of that to kind of narrow things down.
I would go to, I mean, vague. You got to remember, I'm trying to think as far as I guess you
can sabotage from what I read, and you
can send rebels too, and rebels can sabotage the other island.
Right, but it's not like active warfare of any.
You also have active weather elements, so you have hurricanes.
I saw that, but those didn't seem controlled by you. Yeah, those just seem to be there.
It's not controlled by you. The only thing you control is your like boat, your battle. I don't want to say battleship, like your boat, and then the pirates can come after you and steal stuff. And it's a really good thing. I want to say that was 1978 when that was developed.
Yeah, it's pretty early. I want to say the other came out within like 2-3 years of that I had on the docket to kind of talk about, and that kind of leads
Utopia?
into
Utopia. Is the
No,
first.
that wasn't started to be developed until I think 81 because that was Don
Really?
Daglow.
Was it 83 at the release or 82?
82, I think.
Okay.
But he didn't come on to Mattel Electronics until I think 81. So there's no way it was developed before then. And that's his baby. He kind of came up with that concept as he used to be a school teacher in
81. It came out
in LA, and I think it was in LA. And
although that's an overseas Australian version, so that could have been way after, anyways.
He converted some sort of games that he did with his students to make.
Yeah, I've got two games in mind that and I'll talk to you guys about this only because I don't want to spoil the whole video for next week if anybody here is going to watch it. But
spoilers.
I've already done a significant amount of spoilers by going into it this much, but we'll talk about it offline. But I meant to ask before we went live, and I forgot about it, and then I just kind of blurted it out when we went live. So anyway, we'll talk about it when we come off of this because I need to know if I need to do a rewrite on this.
Yeah. And Rab might know a little bit more on that. Like I said, I kind of got into that later, so it wasn't one that I did not grow up with Utopia, but that'd be best to probably ask him a little bit more on that. You caused me to cause all my cats to wake up 4:30 ready to eat, all because I got up to watch the show. I think we're all having cat issues. My cat's ready to break the door down. Nick's cat, it wants to eat and is mad that he's doing the show.
I just fed my cat. I have my feeder actually has a Wi-Fi feature on it, so all I have to do is just dispense it from the application. So long as there's food, she'll get food. The problem was we had to get the dog in the basement, so the dog would need the cat food.
That cat food is delicious. I tell you what, when you're ever falling in hard times, some gravy and liver and giblets are just I'm kidding. That's so disgusting. Indie Racing says Utopia.
I don't eat any of that. He just like kibbles.
Take the left island and put all your crops in the southeastern part of the island. There is a few little. I mean, for a game that early, there is some cheats you can do. I do know that.
No, the fact that there's something that close to like a real-time strategy game that early and on Intellivision and not on PC is kind of impressive. Because it's kind of thing I expected to originate more on PC than a console, quite frankly, because it seems more in line with doing it on a PC.
You have to remember what Intellivision was supposed to be at that time. I mean, they needed educational content. They pitched the Intellivision as an educational sort of microcomputer light that you can kind of get started on computing, as opposed to what the Atari was, what APF and Coleco with the Telstar and these other systems had been. This was a system that was going to be a computer starter kit for the home, and they needed to have stuff. They had the sports stuff that was really a lot of strategy, like the football strategy in that. In bowling, you had a lot of strategy in how you were going to play. A lot of these games were strategy based, so it really did fit what they were trying to do. And Don Daglow had been making games for like a decade by that point, so he was, he had a computer pedigree of making these really in-depth
that
games.
Would make sense as to why that showed up on there, because I'm like, I mean, for the time it looks fairly good for what it's trying to do, right? I mean, I hate the sounds the game makes, but that's a constant complaint for me in anything that early. Most of the sounds sound like somebody's trying to. I'd rather stab my ears out than hear a lot of the audio music on some of the early games. Yeah, that actually sounds pleasant compared to some of the sounds I've had come out of some of these old games.
Yeah. Oh, you should at least they had sounds coming out of TV. You should go back to like the original Fairchild Channel F, before it was a Channel F, back when it was VES, and they just had it coming out of the system. Little tiny speakers in the system. They didn't even have an audio wire for that.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
so the sounds may have been garbage, but at least you heard them.
Well, I mean, they were sounds, right? I mean, it's an early console. The fact that they had sound is impressive to begin with. So, I mean, I'm not saying that what they did wasn't impressive. I'm just saying trying to go back and listen to those sounds now.
Last ditch deal.
Is like nails down a chalkboard. It's just bad in a lot of ways. Some of them aren't too bad because it's just normal bleeps and bloops, but some of them are really loud sounds and weird screeches, and that just drives me insane.
As a kid, I was like, I loved the early like voice games. Like I loved the robot sound. I always called it the speak and spell kind of voice that voice that would sound like this, like shall we play a game, like war games kind of thing.
Early
Like I used to I loved that old computer voice, so to me that's why I like stuff like Wizard of War and some of those games that have that style voice. So that still kind of hits a nostalgia nerve.
Well, I mean, like,
you get mad at your Alexa
kind of a
or
different
Siri just because they have like a little British accent. Like, you don't sound like what I thought you were going to sound like back in the day.
Right.
I don't want a British lady telling me what to do, when to turn right. I want press 5.
Cameron says
it's better her than Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, he's just unintelligible. They actually had him on GPS at one point.
Hey, John.
The voice for GPS. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Did they ever get like these?
Lady and Relic.
Off-brand actors and stuff who have like famous for their voices to do any of those voiceovers for GPS? I know there's a couple of them, but
I think they did.
I'm surprised that never became more of a thing.
Back when Garmin and TomTom was still a thing, I think they did that.
Oh, I had a TomTom. Yeah. I had a Garmin and a TomTom.
What was funny is I want to say before the pandemic, me, my wife, and one of my best friends here, we all decided to do a group trip to Napa, right?
Oh,
because we were just starting to get
like road rat.
Let's go to Napa, spend some time there, and see some wineries and stuff like that. But when we landed, we were going to pick up the car, and there were two ladies trying to negotiate down the price of having a Garmin GPS unit for the car, and I'm like, but you have a phone in your hand, but you have a cell phone in your hand. I'm so confused right now.
I don't know. I would just think, I mean, that could be like a whole avenue of YouTube to explore if there was like old instructions of, I'm trying to think of like some famous recognizable voices who would fit, and I'm just drawing a blank. I can't even name an actor right now. I'm spent this week, so.
Ozzy Osbourne would definitely be noticeable.
No, an Ozzy
Chris
Osbourne
Pratt
is unintelligible. He only has to do like 7 lines,
Mario?
and that's it. They all sound the same.
Yeah, like Chris Pratt would be noticeable now. Mike Myers would still be very noticeable, I think, to a lot of people. Trying to think.
They had
the guy that did the voice of Batman in the Lego Movie. He's got a really noticeable voice.
Oh, that's the guy that did Arrested Development.
Yeah, I can't think of his name right now, though.
He was Job in Arrested, or not Job.
It's like Aaron something. I can't remember his name.
No, it's I can't remember. You'd think I'd look it up.
Anyway, I didn't mean to. We're already derailed, and we just
I'm drawing blanks.
The guy that did the voice for Knight Rider to Kit. They have Garmin.
Yeah, but I think he's.
They had a Garmin that did
alive?
that. Yeah, he's still alive, and they had he's probably in his late 60s. He was sort of young when he did that. But they have a GPS that has like the 3 bars that move and talk, like looks like the Kit display.
Yeah,
I want that. I just want that. To hear him go, please turn right at the stop sign. That would just be so soothing. Michael, up ahead, there's a speed trap. It'd be so cool.
Rerouting, Michael.
Why
can't you follow directions?
Or do like the Space Odyssey, what are you doing turning here, Dave?
Oh, Hal? Yeah.
This sounds highly irregular. This is highly irregular. You shouldn't be taking this route. There's lots of construction. I'm going to have to turn down and disable the vehicle, Dave. Oh, my God.
Evening, Savitor. Hi, Legend of Nelda.
Yay.
Sean popped in. Blitzkrieg popped in. I almost missed saying.
There we go. Yes.
Hey, Sean. Hey, Blitzkrieg. Hey, Legend of Nelda.
When the vehicle comes out, they have to offer a keyboard peripheral. Hey, maybe they finally will come out with a keyboard peripheral.
They came out with one in '83. It just was not what was advertised.
By the way, during my training, I can't say anything, so all I can say that I am now test trained. I said training. I mean testing. Might you have training?
I was going to say, you went through a formal training?
I went to formal training, and Intellivision offers that now. No, I'm now testing a game I've never played. And I must say it's pretty amazing. And I wish I could say more, but it's a game I've never played or never had the experience with, and it's pretty awesome. So I hope you guys get to see something soon. I do.
The game is called Double Jumps.
It's called Double Jump the Game.
He's so bad at it.
What if I just press down on it harder? No, just press twice.
Hey, Sean, good to see you. I haven't
What if
seen
I
you
press
today.
it 2 places at once? No, just press twice.
Yeah, Sean, I keep saying, until there's like official news for the company, we just been kind of being amigos forever.
Yeah, pretty much. We're just come up with
just
different
talking
topics
retro,
until there's something to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we could talk Atari, we could talk Nintendo, we could talk any Switch, we could talk landfills full of Funko Pops like we did last week. But we just been kind of hanging out because we really love the community and love what we built. And it has two meanings, like I kind of said at the beginning. It was come and join the Ultimate Gaming stream because you will find a friend forever in this stream, an Amico forever. So there you go. Don't need to change the name. But good to see you, man. Really good to see you. The gunny voice module for my GPS from Full Metal Jacket. Oh, Tutor Vision. They said there's only 3 out of 16 Tutor Visions recovered.
Now, did they shut down Tutor Vision because of the contract they had to put games on
World Book
the
Encyclopedia
Nintendo Entertainment System?
Well, I
Or
thought it
did
was
they
the
stop
encyclopedias.
with hardware altogether because of that contract?
It was something like that, I remember, because I know some of the Super Pro systems and NTV3 systems, you have to open them up, but they used whatever Tutor Visions, which was the higher end models. They just turned them into those. They had already
stopped producing the INTV3 systems by that point, but they were
so then it's Super Pro
marketing the Super Pro systems, and they canceled abruptly. And I don't know if the Tutor Vision being canceled was part of that.
Airplane 2. That is Airplane, actually. The
stipulation for them to get games on the NES.
Paul Rubin's voice from Flight of the Navigator.
I can see that working.
Will Arnett. Oh my God. I'm sorry, unless you guys already read that. I'm just catching up here.
Will Arnett. That's it.
Yeah, Will Arnett is amazing.
That's who I was trying to think of, was Will Arnett.
Yeah, and I love him.
Tommy Lee Jones doing like his voice from Small Soldiers would be great
yes,
too.
the game.
We would have been here until tomorrow, waiting on me to come up with one actor's name. I'm just drawing blanks.
I would have just looked it up if it had bothered me that much, quite frankly. I'm glad somebody answered it, but if it had kept bugging me, I just would have looked it up. I'd be like,
oh man,
Google.
Look at John just spilling the beans, man.
No,
Duke Nukem's voice would be.
He's trying to send people off the scent. You played some Missile Command.
That's what I'm playing, Missile Command. Missile Command is awesome. Yes, so I guess we'll just say that I was playing that.
Are you playing awesome. The new ET? Because don't tell Atari.
Yeah, Chuck, we could say it now. Well, I like to keep things nice and secret because I respect an NDA. I'm just saying I respect an NDA. All you other loosey lips, I'm going to be the good guy in class.
I don't have any beans to spill. I don't know what you're talking about. I got no information.
I'll tell you some so you can.
You guys are going to see a video in like 2 hours, like drunken Art Big Fall. Like, Happy St. Patrick's Day. Guess what I was playing?
Yeah, but like I was playing, I can't say. Say that Night Driver game's looking fantastic. Wait, what? Freaking internet explodes. Casey says, any consoles have near complete Tutor Vision innards? I know, like that's what we were saying. Some of the, and I might be not caught up here. Sorry, I'm not usually doing this. That's the Super Pros were. I knew it was one of the INTV versions that they started using what they were going to use for that. And if you do find them, they're more valuable. I wouldn't know what to look for. I guess I'd have to. I'm sure there's info online, but I don't even know if CMart has a Tutor Vision because I'd be curious to see if he did.
No, there's only been a handful, but yeah they sparkle. They have an extra sparkle when you display them.
They sparkle. They glow a little bit when you go to plug them in.
They just look like smarter consoles.
Yeah. See, there we go. There's NDA alert.
We really do need like a.
Yeah, so much for the NDA. Just tell you everything I've been playing, guys. Let's share.
I notice he's no longer Captain Nintendo. He's Captain NDA, which is kind of awesome.
Captain NDA.
It's not Captain N or Captain Nintendo. It's Captain
That's pretty
NDA.
funny.
It's pretty amazing. I like
See,
it.
even CMAR, that's like, so like that. That's how hard they are to find, because wow, no kidding. The
I
Tutor
don't know.
Pros
With
have
Nintendo,
the
it might be
newer,
Captain Cease and Desist.
okay, so the Tutor Pros have the newer InTV font rather than the standard Intellivision font. Okay, so it's, I'd have to, so I don't want to pull that down, but that, so that one up there, you can't see it from that distance.
That's what I'm saying.
That one up there has an INTV font, but that's a System 3. It's not a Super Pro. But if that's the font you're talking about, Heavy Shield is
more of an Arial font than an old Times New Roman.
Cloudy. Oh, dude. Could I tell you some stories about Cloudy Mountain? But I won't. What is everybody?
John, we've been good, man.
What's you so far? Yeah. I've been doing good.
Yeah, new channel's busy. Work's kind of calm, and a lot of stuff going on around.
But I'm
just
here.
in life, it's been very busy.
I will say this: I have dabbled in what is known as Catfighter in some way, shape, or form. Just, I'm serious about that. But once again, that's really
my money's always on Assassin Kitty.
He's played the extended version, the deluxe version that has an extra 2 frames of animation.
Oh, into the system ROM. If you fire up a game and the font and the title screen looks updated, you have a Tutor Pro. Oh, wow. I'll have to check that out. Well, I mean, I don't have to check that out. I have to. John says he's been playtesting Shark a lot lately. Very good game. Really enjoy the game, especially now that I figured out a technique for keeping away the shark when it's after me. See, my thing is like 2 players, it's good because you can have a one player nipping the tail while the other one's distracting him. Especially if you have 4 players, you can destroy him easy. I shouldn't say easy; it gets harder. But yeah, doing 1 player though, that is hard. When you get up to like the hammerhead shark and you're trying to move around, you're kind of just figure eighting around him, trying to get like, and he's just constantly turning on a dime. It gets hard, man. Next Level Gaming says God mode is cheating, John. Just saying.
This trick is called Swim Faster.
Captain NDA had a Tutor Pro in high school, but she made me sign an NDA. Well, that's what those tutors will do. That is what those tutors will do. So let's start in with our topics. We got a couple interesting ones here. And I'd like to start up with gaming twists. That really
I had to look
or betrayals.
Totally
Betrayals or twists.
Blank initially.
So I'll say one while and then I'll go to you guys. But like the one I remember the most when we talking about gaming twists, Metroid. Everybody thought, look at this crazy mech suit adventurer, and at the end it was, oh, it's a lady. Like back in the day, that was a twist. You didn't know Samus was a lady, so I thought that was a pretty spectacular twist. It wasn't a betrayal twist or a bad twist. It was more of a, oh, that's interesting, But that was one I remember when it comes to like stuff that kind of stuck with me from old style gaming.
Yeah. Go ahead, Reb.
What about you guys? Yeah, go, Reb.
I was going to say, I mean, I think she was in her suit, so it was so hard to tell. I mean, the mid to late 80s, there were so many hair bands, I didn't even take notice of anything at the time. It was just...
Well, you never really you never really got a look at the actual character unless you put in the Justin Bailey code.
No, and I didn't.
And the whole concept
had no idea what that was. And
the
manual kept referring to Samus as a he, so I didn't know any better. And then, like, okay, I'm not getting a swimsuit ending. I'm getting, like, just take off the helmet. And all right, so, I mean, a lot of people in the 80s had a lot of hair. A lot of product was going around, so I didn't think anything.
Honestly, that
mine was
later on. I found out.
Like,
Samus was initially supposed to look like a robot because the original concept was to have basically it was a combination of Metro and some other word that they used for robot. I'm forgetting my own video at this point. And they sort of combined those together to come up with Metroid, right? Which basically was sort of translating to like underground robot. So it was supposed to look more like a cybernetic styled humanoid robot for the whole thing. So there was no way you were supposed to know until you got to the end that there was even anybody in there. It could have just been a robot.
Yeah. Especially with like the upgrades and transformations and turning into a ball and stuff. I mean, you really didn't think that it you had to suspend a lot of belief for a lot of sequences in any case.
It might have been as simple as Droid Captain NDA. I can't remember right off the top of my head. I know they combined like 2 different words to basically make Metroid. It's been so long since I did that video or went back and revisited that video that I can't really remember. It might have been Android. Yeah. Because I know they cut part off of each one, and then when you kind of put them together, there you go. You have Metroid, right? So it made sense when they combined it. So yeah, I could see that easily being a twist. One of the ones that
you had a lot of power ups, so it's a lot of metabolism and steroids.
Yeah, there you go.
Put them together, you have Metroids.
There are numerous of these that I could go into that I'm remembering now that I kind of went through a few lists and remembering some of the games I've gone through in the past. But one of the ones I thought of as I was getting ready, and that's kind of why I threw on this particular jersey, is Shadow Link. When I was playing Link's Adventure, I didn't think for a second I would be fighting myself at the end of Zelda 2.
I got that one on too.
I didn't even think Shadow Link would be a thing. I thought you'd be fighting Ganon again or something else, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this wizard pops up, and then your Shadow's trying to beat the living crap out of you.
And he's casting the same spells as you, and he's doing all the same moves as you. So it's like everything you learn in this game was grueling, and then to have it kind of thrown back in your face, like everything you do, I can do better. And I didn't. You didn't know just to crouch in the corner. You were just like
I think somebody either told me that or I found that by accident and just cheesed it. I know a lot of people in the retro community frowned on that, but I'm like, I don't care. I got this far.
Everybody has learned techniques and stuff. But yeah, that was one, and another one that I put down as relevant to that because it didn't even occur to me until you see it for the first time. Like, oh, you could do that. Was in Galaga when the ship comes down and captures you, and you just these enemies run from them. I mean, in Japan they had so much trouble trying to convey Space Invaders because people didn't think like the ships would be shooting at you, and they were thinking like Pong. This thing is coming down at me. I have to go catch it and bat it back up like Pong. Like no, those are bullets that are going to shoot you. So in all of these space shooter games, you're like trying to stay away from the enemy, trying to stay away from their shots. And this thing comes down, you try to stay away, and then it has this force field beam. You're like, you don't want any part of that. And then you realize you see somebody else at the arcade doing it, and they get captured by it, and then
that's how you learned
and get a power up, and they are twice as strong. It's like, like there is a benefit to letting yourself get trapped and then capture that ship back, and you get 2 ships. It's like a calculated wager that you're going to be strong. You can get this back and be even stronger for it. It costs you a life, but you can get that back.
I'm betting this was a surprise twist to a lot of people back in the day. I wouldn't even think of it now, but the original Super Mario Brothers, when you got to the end of a stage and then there was another stage, or you got to the castle at the end of World 1, and then there's another world. And you're like,
but that wasn't just Mario Brothers. That's Donkey Kong. What games before Donkey Kong had you converse the stage, and at the end of the stage, you reached, your girlfriend, and then Donkey Kong takes her up to the next stage.
And you go to a completely different stage.
So this whole, sorry, Mario, but our princess is in another castle, that was not just from Super Mario Brothers. That had origins from Donkey Kong. You reach the end, and nope, you got more to go. You reach the end, nope, and they do that 4 times. 4 or 5.
I think it's 4. I think.
So, yeah, I mean that's such a trope now, but that's been a long-standing tradition in the Mario series.
Yeah, there were so many. I'm trying to think of so much now. You got me think there was quite a few things in the arcade that. Okay, I got one for consoles. I guess I have to go back to NES. I don't know if you remember. Well, I know it's like. Everybody knows now, it's like common knowledge, but you remember when like all the hype of Mike Tyson's Punch Out wore out. I remember getting a copy of regular Punch-Out after the license expired with Mike Tyson, and just playing it, going, oh, okay, so it's Punch-Out. Well, who's the main? Mr. Dream? Like, that was a twist. Like, I was like, what's Vanilla Ice doing at the end of my Punch-Out game with all of Mike Tyson's moves? So to me, that was an insane twist. I'm like, he wasn't even in the arcade.
Funny is it was either, I think it was him that was the original end boss in the Japanese version. Mike Tyson didn't come in until the U.S. release.
So the the Famicom version was that then.
Right. The Famicom, I want to say gold cartridge or something like that, was the original release.
No, the arcade.
I was thinking the NES release. But yeah, there was the arcade before that. And wasn't that Bald Bull?
I don't remember who the end boss was for that, because it took 2 quarters or something. It took more quarters. I never played it.
The first boss and
I just sucked so much. I just watched other people play it, so I was too scared to play it.
The first, I actually owned the first Punch-Out cabinet. It was Mr. Sandman was the very first boss.
Okay, I was say, because I know the arcade cabinet for both Punch-Out and Super Punch-Out.
Macho Man was on number 2, so the second one was Macho.
Actually, both the arcade Punch-Out and Super Punch-Out came out before any of the releases, including the NES release. Because Super Punch-Out actually was sort of a revisit of Super Punch-Out for the arcade that came out shortly on the heels of the original Punch-Out at the arcade.
Shaking his boobs, that was a twist. His pre-fight dance was to shake his man boobs.
But there's a couple of them that I can think of that.
Yes, this was another one. Michael Hayes pulled it. This was on my list, man. To say nothing of what was going on between rounds in Ring King when the trainers were pushing in on their chests and going between their legs. What was that? Yeah, even as a kid, I was like, that's weird.
Nintendo had such weird sex and violence censorship policies, and yet that one got through. And we were all like, what is this? Sure, it's nothing. It happens in wrestling. It's cool.
But what were they pushing on their stomach? Like because remember, like, I don't know if you guys remember, but back, like, at least when I was like in junior high school, there was a whole thing where they would put, like, this was just a thing. I never did this. This is insane. Where people would take someone against a wall and push on their stomach or their chest until they passed out, almost like a CPR when you don't need it. And they're like, you'll see your past life and blah, blah, blah. Like, that was like and they had to come in and talk to people and go, listen, you're basically making heart failure happen. You can't do that. But I was like, back as a kid, I thought, is that what they're doing? Like, they shouldn't do that in between boxing matches. Anyways, yeah, that's a big one, man.
I'd say I wouldn't even really call this modern at this point, but BioShock.
I went to public school too, but yours sounded much rougher than mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get people knocked out, but there was no haphazard CPR.
Yeah, that's just weird. I would say BioShock. Would you reverse? I don't know if you guys remember that one.
Yeah, BioShock. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That twist towards the end, because I don't think anybody saw that coming until you got there.
Atlas.
Yeah.
That was unsettling. I think that's just the storyline,
because it kind of tilted the entire game on its head. Because as it flashed back to some of the instances, and you play through the game again, and you're listening to it and saying, you're going, wait a minute, this is way creepier than I thought it was.
Yeah, speaking of creepy, look at Chris had that done. He's like, my friends did that to me once. I was out for a while. They all ditched me out of fear. And then 1 Inch Bicep says, you had to breathe in real deep 10 times. That's correct. And then put your back to the wall and they push on your chest. Well, we didn't have cell phones back then, so that's what we did to have fun, I guess. Oh my god.
Well, Mike, to be fair, the ending being somebody like Atlas or somebody like that, or that guy being against you, is one thing. The fact that you were mind controlled the whole time, I think, was the twist that kind of got us the most.
You were mind controlled, you were groomed, you were kind of it makes you rethink everything that you were getting. Like, there's a lot of games where there's a twist and there's some sort of backstabbing or I guess your close friend, it turns out, becomes your worst enemy. I mean, that
Yeah.
goes back to Double
Oh, yeah.
Dragon, and
Yeah.
that's goes back to probably Greek mythology there. But I think just the extent and how well it was done in some games, they really kind of stick with you better than a lot of others.
Yeah, I would also say
BioShock did it really well.
Yeah, BioShock did an excellent job. I thought KOTOR did it really well too, with revealing that you're Darth Revan at one point in the game.
Oh yeah,
and I had to pull up a list of some of these, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh my god, because I was trying to think of this topic today, and I was totally drawing a blank on like everything. I just could not think.
Yeah,
I never played 1886. I totally skipped on that one. It came out so late in the lifespan that when it finally did come out, I just passed on it. I'm like, I'm over this title now, unfortunately.
Yeah,
it's
on my backlog. It's games I want to play that I just have never got around to, and I don't want to I think we can make a rule, like, we're not going to spoil anything for anyone over like the past 10, 15 years. If there's a game that's older than that and you haven't seen the ending, we'll try not to do too much details.
Yeah. I mean, like in this one, I was kind of surprised.
But you just ruined Zelda 2, the Adventure Link, for everybody.
I did. I totally did.
Like, I've never even played that. Now I don't want to. I already know the ending.
Chrono Trigger had one that to me seemed kind of weird, but apparently it caught everybody else. Like when Chrono dies in Chrono Trigger.
Yeah, because you're a protagonist.
Well, to me, it just like everybody's like, oh no, he's gone from the game forever. I'm like, no, he's not. They literally tell you to go revive him the very next step.
Yeah.
Like they literally tell you to go do that. What are you talking about? They're like, well, you can beat the game without him. I'm like, yeah, but they tell you to go revive him. I mean, a bigger twist to me was Phantasy Star 2 when Nii dies after the fight with Nii 1. And they won't revive her again, and you have to bury her on the hill. That was far more emotional to me.
Yeah. I don't know, Nick. I think for you, like, the most emotional would be Yeah, I'm just struggling with actors' names now. Train of thought is gone. Flamingo, please tell us about your twist that scarred you emotionally.
He twists his neck.
The twist is he's got to go.
He was playing you guys off for the next topic. No, I'm kidding. Continue.
Okay, a couple things. I think one to bring up. We were talking about GTA just a couple weeks back. Was it last week or the week before? We were talking about GTA, and I know in Vice City, your buddy is what's his name from Miami Vice? Not Miami Vice, but Vice City. The character, your sidekick, your buddy in crime. I know you're Tommy. I forget your buddy's name.
But, I never played. I haven't played any.
I do know who you're talking about. I just can't remember. I didn't even remember the name.
Lance.
Okay.
So Lance.
Chance?
Yeah, something. Anyway, the thing that is always difficult for me is like a lot of games give you the illusion of agency. Like you don't really affect the plot. You're kind of forced into the actions you take, and like it reaches the next part of the narrative. So it's like, okay, you're going to play the little bits in between that aren't going to matter, and that will advance the story to the next part that we want. We want to tell you this narrative story. It's going to be a great story. You're going to love it. It's going to be Last of Us, and it's going to be amazing. You're going to weep at the end. So you're going to let you play and go shoot some zombies and do these little quests and stuff until you get to the next part of the story. So when you have like some character backstab you for things that you did that you really didn't have any control over doing. Like, I think in that story, like, your character, Nick, you were talking about how you felt like these characters, you didn't care about them. You felt like they were just jerks.
Right.
And you were kind of forced into these actions to be a jerk. You weren't given the option not to. If you're not, you don't advance the story. You don't go anywhere. You just go on a cruise and listen to AM radio for the next 50 hours. But if you advance the story, then you are a jerk. And you pay the price for being a jerk because your buddy turns on you. He doesn't like you. He's against you for your actions that you're kind of forced into. So I guess my question for you guys is like, is video games really a good medium for this sort of narrative where you're forced into actions to reach these plot points, and then to have someone like backstab you or turn on you? Does it is it a good medium for that, or is it kind of too standardized in what you have to do to get there that it doesn't work as well as maybe a book or a movie where you don't see it coming, you don't feel it? Like, some of these are really well done. Obviously, you really don't see them coming, but I think for a lot of them, you either see it coming or you're like, you just come to expect that, okay, this person's close to me, this person's close to me, who's going to turn on me at the end? And you just kind of expect that twist to come. It's kind of
I feel like it depends on the setup, right? Like the surprise twist thing, I've seen this done in a lot of movies and it doesn't work as well because then you can't really build what's realistically the antagonist to the story, right? But if you have two people going along and you have one person who's kind of playing the side a little bit, but it's not shown, and they've been through all this with you, and then they have a twist, you could see that kind of stick with you. Kind of reminds me of like the technically it's Final Fantasy IV, but the Dragoon that kept leaving your party and like betraying you and coming back and betraying you and coming back. The first time that happened, I'm like, wait, what? And then he'd come back and they'd gear him up again, and then he'd leave again. At one point, I think I stopped putting him in my party. Because I was so fed up with losing all that gear.
Yeah. Every Metal Gear Solid or Metal Gear series, you just expect 2 or 3. There's some new character, some new background that they're going to introduce. They're going to turn out to be a double agent, a double crosser. They're going to, they're going to be the final boss in the end.
But I mean, it's cool storytelling, but it's, for video games, you feel absolutely betrayed on that when you've worked to do that or had no control to do that one, because it's part of what you had to do to complete the game. And it's, I don't know, it's a little.
But once you kind of see, I guess my question is, like, once you kind of see that this is like a repeat pattern, like some of them do a really good job of hiding the fact and you really don't expect it. But a lot of them, you just kind of come to this expectation. If there's some extra baggage in your party and you just wait for the rug to be pulled out at some point, and towards the end, okay, now they're the bad guy. Okay, so I'm reaching the end of the game. I got it. This guy has been against me for the whole time, and he's been by my side for the whole time. Keep my enemies closer. Keep my friends close, my enemies closer. That did me no good, because now I've got to have this big end boss battle with.
I'd say the Double Dragon one fits too, because that's kind of cool. Because then you guys are like fighting each other to see who gets the girl, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's completely out of no
that comes out of left field.
Yeah, it's unexpected.
And that kind of fits in with what you're saying, right? You're both kind of fighting together this whole time, and then all of a sudden you have to face each other, right?
Yeah, I'm with Creep. I just want to blow stuff up in my games. That's I just want the action.
And Relic mentioned Aerith's death in Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
And,
oh my God,
that one was spoiled for me long before I ever touched that game, and I don't know. Some of these, I've been struck by those so early on in gaming before twists like that hit, that it doesn't surprise me as much anymore when they do some of that stuff. Like when they did that to Chrono, I'm just like, okay, so how do I get Chrono back?
Yeah.
That was immediately where my brain went and immediately what I did. I didn't even think about continuing the story without him. Like that didn't even get into my head.
Yeah.
Be Ready had a comment in there about games that have like multiple endings and multiple twists to them, and I think this is one of the places where I really do want to champion the potential of AI and the potential of assisted art programs and stuff that can really help, because obviously in creating something that is really narrative driven, there's only so many man hours that we can put into the game. Otherwise, the game is going to cost $7,000 to play, because you're not going to have 27 different alternate endings depending on what you do. But now with these assets being put into the game and instruction sets that you could give, if you have the artists putting in the time and making the models and making the stuff and making the direction of what they want to do, and if this, then this, you could really do a lot of setups of having your actions have more agency in the game and having more outcomes that maybe the AI creates a little bit of what that outcome is going to look like based on all of the inputs that you're putting into it. And it's not going to be so far-fetched. Like, this is a picture of an AI interpretation of the Mona Lisa, and it's like, what were you thinking? This looks ridiculous. No, it's working with the assets that the artists are putting in. It's working with the instructions that you put in. It's working on the basic narratives that it knows and twists of stuff, and it can give you 30 different outcomes that feel organic based on the work that the development team has put in. I think that's one direction of AI that I'd be interested to see that I don't see anyone talking about, but it seems like it could be beneficial to these narrative
that could
type stories.
actually be a good way of being able to add more endings like that. Me personally, I'm not. I'm the odd man out. I'm not real big when a game has like a ton of endings, like the fact that
Well, I don't want to see them all.
The fact that Chrono Trigger has like 12 endings, it's just exhausting to me. Like I can't even bring myself to finish that game the first time. Much less try to complete it like 12 times.
Look at an ending tree.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do need to sit down and finally finish it. I got almost to the very end of the game and got distracted by something else, and I've walked away from it for like 4 or 5 months. Right? So I almost need to restart it, but I don't want to. I really don't want to.
Well, speaking of something we don't want to do, it's our next topic. I'm kidding. It's bad ports or disappointments. Something you waited for to come out. You're like, this is going to be the bee's knees, because that's what kids said back in the 90s, the bee's knees, or keen, or any other type
like
of 1950s
1812.
The 1812 reference.
I had more of those in modern games than I do in older games, really, because I feel like the hype train wasn't as big in older games.
I think and let me go, I'll just do these first, because I know you guys will probably have a lot more, but my thing, I'm going obviously straight retro. Well, I mean, you got like the obvious Cyberpunk 2077, which was a big thing, you know, a year or two or so ago. But I'm talking about like back in the day. I remember, you know,
Does that one disappoint? Spoiler here. Come on.
Yeah, right. Now it's okay, right? I remember. I remember this game, which was, I still liked it, and I dealt with it because that's kind of what you did back then. But Donkey Kong by Coleco for the Intellivision, a green swamp monster was Donkey Kong. Mario looked like a pig or a paper boy. There was no music. Luckily, this has been rectified by the homebrew community to show how great and how almost arcade perfect you can make a port now. The other thing was, I remember, you know, my cousins had the Atari, and they're like, "Oh, we're getting Pac-Man," and it was, what are these vitamins? Why is everything flickering? Why is Pac-Man moving up and down but not changing direction? That, as a kid, like all of us were like, I'd say the Pac-Man Atari port was my most disappointing. I didn't hate it because I
had no qualms with Atari with Pac-Man at home.
But
I thought it worked for
Ms.
me.
Pac-Man. You got to admit, when Atari 2600 Ms. Pac-Man is a beautiful, beautiful port for that time. Beautiful port. So what happened on the first one? It was rushed, just like a lot of
it was rushed. Atari did not in increasing the size of. I think that was an 8 meg or a 4 meg cartridge, and there was the first time they went to 8 meg ROMs for the cartridges. So Atari was being cheap at the time. They rushed it. Their developer was a young hotshot that was given kind of the green light to do whatever, and he made a lot of artistic choices, and that bit them. So I think moving forward, they saw, okay, we're going to keep this as arcade perfect as possible. And I think they learned some instruction. You have to screw up like that on something. Yeah, unfortunately, it was the Pac-Man, but I think Pac-Man gets a lot of heat for being like a bad port, and I don't remember hearing a lot of people talk about how bad Pac-Man was until later on in the 90s or early 2000s. It was kind of okay, a little bit disappointing, but it seems like it seems like that mythology of it exceeded the actual game or the actual experience. At least
what about
that was my
you got
experience.
Zaxxon and Defender on Intellivision were not even, I mean, those worlds.
The version I played
was Coleco as well, I must say.
Yeah, I was about to say, the version I played was on ColecoVision, and it was good.
But I mean, Coleco made it for Intellivision. It was another kind of bad. I didn't know. I played it recently because I never had it back in the day, but I didn't mind it. It just was not Zaxxon. It was just a straightforward shooter instead of an isometric kind of side, you know, where it took away the whole 3D aspect. And they did it a straightforward. It was an okay game for what it was, but it was not it was a disappointment. It was back in the day. I'm sure to people.
I think one that I can think of that is now pretty loved and everybody has really enjoyed as a game is TMNT, the first TMNT game on the NES. I don't think that's what anybody expected that was going to be. Well, it was just. Well, I mean, here's the thing. It's not that it wasn't a good game. I think I stand by it as a good game, but I don't think that's what anybody wanted out of a Ninja Turtles game when it came out.
I did. It was like a Zelda 2. You had an overhead world, like an overhead map, and then you went into a side-scrolling with these little stages and levels. And
I think everybody wanted more like what the second game was. Like a more of a brawler kind of game. I think that
didn't even exist yet. I mean, there weren't brawlers in what was
it? Not on the NES, but I think there were brawlers in the arcades before then.
I thought you were getting Super Mario.
Yeah, I think Double Dragon actually was out before TMNT.
Yeah.
So you could have done it like Double Dragon, and I think people would have more or less gravitated to that a little bit more. I mean, the other ones that came out on the NES were, especially now going back and look at it through the lens of like Turtles in Time and all the others, you're like, oh, that's what I want out of a Mutant Ninja Turtles game. But the first one just seems like such a weird outlier to many people. Not that makes it a bad game. I think it's a very punishing game, but I think it's a good game.
Yeah, but I think most licenses and most games were platformers at the time. So the expectation for a license, if you're going to get something like, if you're going to get Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or you're going to get Transformers, or you're going to get any big license, He-Man, it would be the biggest genre of the time, platformers. Okay, it would be a platformer as well. And the fact that you could switch between your turtles and they have different abilities that would help you reach things or help you do things, I think was kind of along the lines. I remember reading in the magazines at the time, it seemed like it was well enough received.
Not fair enough.
I agree with Sean here too. He's talking about E.T., which is also, everyone thought it was such a huge disappointment of the crash, blah, 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 blah. I played E.T. as a kid and accepted it for what it was. I did hate falling in the pits, but other than that, I never hated E.T. It was a memory I had. As a matter of fact, I want to get it complete in box, which it's pretty easy to find. You just go to the desert and you can just dig one up. But no, I agree with you, Sean. It wasn't a bad game at all. There's
a bunch of modern games like one, and I think it gets more. I think it becomes more prevalent the further along you get, because there's so much hype build up for games that you get more stuff like Cyberpunk 2077, that people had these huge expectations from coming off of CD Projekt Red's Witcher 3, which is the main game that they had made that was amazing, and that still took them a while to build up that way. Most people apparently didn't find it until after it was all patched and fixed. It wasn't as bad as Cyberpunk, but my understanding is Witcher 3 didn't launch as the whiz-bang, amazing, completely rock-solid game we know today. It was patched into that.
Yeah.
But Cyberpunk being such a big letdown after being hyped for like 8 to 10 years. Anthem is another one. BioWare's foray into a Destiny-style game with like mechs that looked just stellar, and then came out and fell on its face. For me personally, High on Life, I saw a couple of trailers on that, and I'm like, this game's going to be the best thing. I'm going to have so much fun with this. And there's so much dialogue that
it seems like anything with mech. I've never seen a good mech game, like a good robotic mech game. It always seems like they either fail, the controls are bad, or just even the gameplay.
Mech Warriors reportedly a very, very, very good series, but it's also very complicated. I've never really dove into it, but people who are into Mech Warrior, that's what they play.
That's a genre that is really well suited for the PC, just because of the keyboard, the number of interfaces and stuff. I mean, if you're controlling this, completely external suit that can do all these different things, then you want to have a lot of things keyed to it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, Nick, I know you were talking about it. It's something that's happening more and more now, but there's a few old ones I wanted to bring up.
Here we go.
Doom on the 3DO was pretty bad.
Oh, that's like legendarily bad. Talk about a disappointment. But that was made by one poor lady that made that. I watched that little mini documentary. Like, she was just like, she just got the runaround and said, this is all I got. I had to rebuild it from scratch within, a month or something. It was unbelievable. Sorry about that.
What are you guys' thoughts on like some of these games? It's like it seems like it's impossible that they would run in these systems, but they tried. Like, you got something like a Mortal Kombat on the Game Boy was a mess, but Mortal Kombat 2 was a really good port of that game that was able to do a bunch of other stuff on the Game Boy, and that's much simpler hardware, so it's kind of a feat that they were able to get that.
Yeah, I liked the Game Gear version quite a lot, and it was pretty limited. I mean, trying to play it now would be a struggle, but at the time, only having 2 buttons and basically the start button being a block button worked.
But as a kid in like 92,
yeah.
and you have access to that, like it's not like your parents are going to go and buy you a Genesis as well. You've got a Game Gear. It's better than nothing, and it fits the bill for that large audience that may not have access like we do today. Some ones that I was putting down that I thought were kind of fun to go back and visit was like Mega Man on the computer, on the PC.
Oh, I see. I never played that on the computer. I've seen footage, and it looks
they have it
abysmally bad.
They have it on PC Engine,
well,
and I'm wondering if that's similar. Is that similar to the computer version?
Yeah, it's just
PC Engine?
Platform jumping in like 1989, 1990, 1991 was not something computers were very good at. You know, you did not have very intuitive controllers that you can plug into
drivers weren't universal or supported by DOS very well. It wasn't even really until like Windows 95 or 98 that like controller drivers became like a big deal to make work on the PC.
Yeah.
And Steam did a lot to kind of push compatibility across the board with controllers, as far as that goes. So,
and DirectX.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a bunch of work done in the 90s to kind of standardize a bunch of that stuff. And yeah, Steam deserves a ton of credit back then.
Yeah, I remember being really disappointed by Ghostbusters on the NES. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a port. I just remember being very disappointed in that game.
I remember it from Commodore 64. So when the NES version came out, I felt like it was a dumbed down version of that. Believe it or not, I guess it just didn't play as well as the Commodore 64. Especially the driving level just made me angry. Like, it just like, and the more you played on the map screen, it was even longer.
Well, even trying to climb the building at the very end was super frustrating because
you had to have NES Max, which I actually recently sold.
Right, and you'd have to have like the traps or the bait and stuff like that because you couldn't really do anything to the ghosts. And I never did make it to the top there. It was just I'm trying to remember. I might have beat it once, but it was like. It was so hard. Somebody threw up Superman 64. I had
was that when you're going through the rings?
Yeah, I had no expectations for that game anyway.
It was just
I was never that huge of a DC fan, so a Superman game for the 64 was nothing I was looking for in the first place.
I was more disappointed with like Command and Conquer or StarCraft for the N64 because you had you didn't have role-playing games, hardly any, but you did have these attempts at real-time strategies, and that controller just could not handle all the things you wanted to do. Like at the time,
so true.
The PlayStation controller had more buttons, it was more intuitive for that sort of control, but then you also had PC games. You had Age of Empires and all that stuff coming out at the time. It did not make sense on the N64 to put those games. Those were much more disappointments to me.
Well, and the other disappointment on that one too is
Superman
StarCraft was sold as StarCraft Brood Wars on the N64, but you couldn't get access to the Brood Wars part of the game unless you had the actual memory pack. Yeah. So part of your game wasn't even accessible. That would have been a huge
unless you
frustration for me. Perfect Dark would have been the same way because it was basically a demo unless you had the memory pack.
Yeah.
I'm going to close the poll soon. If anyone hasn't voted yet, we got about 50 votes in, so I guess people have voted. It was what's best for Amico Forever. A little silly poll, but at the same time, kind of wondering what you guys want.
Oh, I got a vote on this.
So we have either Art Big Fall.
Hold on, I got to make some alt accounts.
Yeah, there you go. Art Big Fall reporting is number one, or live retro gaming, like we're playing a retro game that we're talking about, more flamingos. You're gonna.
Oh, that's my vote. Yeah, that's my vote.
And or more Intellivision, whether it be old or new or just Intellivision related content. So right now, the more Intellivision, either old or new, at 47%. So that's
we can talk about that off board, but
I
feel like you already have one show that.
Yeah, you already have Astro Smash doing that.
Yeah, I was about to say you already have Astro Smash. So putting that in there just seems like a good way of tanking this show, or why does it exist? Because what do you need add to Astro Smash shows?
So then our third is going to be retro gaming playing.
This one is Astro Blast.
And nobody wants to see Art Big Fall reporting. It's only 16%, which I don't either.
Well, I voted Art Big Fall.
You said the new name for the show is Ass Blaster? I thought that was a Tremors term.
Yes. That was in my contract.
Ninja Gaiden for PC Engine was a terrible port.
Ass Blasters.
I know it's different. I was talking about that the other day. I was talking about that the other day about how like there's some weird PC Engine ports of like Altered Beast, Ninja Gaiden,
Strider,
or Gaiden. There's a
it's
Mega
Ninja
Man.
Gui. It's Ninja Guido, and he throws his throwing stars.
And he goes, hey.
Yeah. All right.
John says he wants to see Art Big Fall playing retro games, so I guess that's pretty cool.
Would they be in television games? Are you going for the all vote?
I voted for Art Big Fall, Nick. Don't blame me.
Just a peacemaker.
It really has to do with the way the poll is set up, because I mean, you already have a show called Astro Smashed, so that completely focuses on Intellivision homebrew.
Oh, we canceled that. You didn't hear we stopped doing that?
You did not cancel Astro.
No, this is not April 1st.
You did it in the last. I thought I could get you there, but it didn't.
He wants more views.
I'm not buying that.
Will we ever get El Verado to make an appearance? No, I don't know who that is.
Kevin, he shows up quite a bit. He's a good guy.
Oh, is that the other? Anyways, yeah, I'm going to close that. But yes, I think most of that is as we want to see some Amico stuff. Trust me, I do too.
Yeah, I was going to say, look at the write-in comments.
Yeah.
It's like 4 votes for Art Big Fall, 127 votes for. Are there any Amico news that we can cover?
Well, it's just it. It's just it. If we had something, we'd be covering it.
You know how Art loves to go to their offices and cause trouble. You never know. But, I mean, 16% of you only wanted to see that. So, oh, wow, it went down to 15 after I said that.
One inch you and I stand alone on Art Big Fall Island.
Yeah, right. Well, you know what? Then you know what that means? That means Richard Crocker will be on next week.
See what you've done?
See what you have done to the show. See, there's always a twist. See, we're talking about twists. There's always a twist. And sometimes it's a betrayal. Well, I'm betraying you all.
But anyways, this day would come. Curse you and your inevitable betrayal.
That's what happens. I put polls up there. I make them myself, and then I do nothing to listen to anyone's suggestions. So, with that being said, Nick, what
we know this is the whole pre-show.
What does the Geek Storian have coming up? Now, by the way, if you guys haven't seen the fighting history, Yair Kung Fu. That's all I'm going to say. I watched.
Yeah, that one's finally out. So if you guys haven't got that one's out. That one dropped last Friday. It actually got a better response than I thought it was going to get. I expected maybe like 50 people to tune into that thing, so it's done significantly better than I thought it would do. I was hoping it would do better than I thought it would do because it was a lot of work. That one was very, very, very hard to do. By no means let that influence your decision. If you want to watch it. But this week I've done the first graphical. I went into the first graphical MMO, at least the earliest one I could find. And then I went into another oddity that Luke's Awakening had posted, wanting me to go into. And I had actually been looking at this one for a while, but I wasn't sure how to approach it. And that was Homework First. this thing effectively is a padlock for your NES.
Yeah.
And that's really all it is. It's
the club. It's the club for you.
It's the club for your NES. I probably should have put that influencing the club.
This is why you see Nintendos with the flap broken off of them, because kids were like, I'm not doing this. Screw it.
Right.
I'm just getting in.
Right. Or just ripping off that bottom part. You could have just torn it off if you were really violent with it. But that one I have been dancing around forever going, I do not know how I'm going to do this. I was actually kind of happy with how it came out overall. I'm not going to lie. I was fairly happy with how it came out, though. I will admit I cursed Luke more than a couple times while I was trying to edit that, because I'm like,
where is Luke?
How do I keep this entertaining, man? If I was just doing a podcast version of this, if I just threw the audio up.
Luke has not been seen since the making of this video. Luke.
Yeah, I was going to say, I could have
sworn Luke is a missing person.
I think he was on the pre-show last night. Apparently, there was a pre-show that YouTube thought it was on a Tuesday for some reason.
Yeah, he kept hitting me up about that because I was on.
He hit me up, and I was like, "Oh, dude, I gotta look." And I looked at it. I was like, "I've always done it on." You click on the day on the calendar; it shows the calendar Wednesday. I was like, I don't know what happened, so I went in it and had to move it.
If you're ever changing the date, do a big graphic on the thumbnail. You can always change the thumbnail after, but at least for the people.
Yeah, well, I usually
put them up a few days early.
I redid the thumbnail because it's like its third iteration or whatever. But usually I do have every Wednesday at 9:30, which I think I'm missing from this new one, so I might have to put that on there.
Let's just be honest. Luke started drinking yesterday.
Yeah, no, Luke was insistent it was yesterday, and we all thought, I just thought he was pulling my leg. I'm like, no. But then he kept hitting me up about it, and I'm like,
I thought it was
wait a minute, he actually thinks that this is happening today, and I'm not on the show. What? It's always on Wednesday. That hasn't changed since we started the show.
Well, I looked, and I wonder if it has something to do with the daylight savings time change to when I did it, and
I don't know,
because I did it late at night, so it might when I set it, so it might have been right at the switch, and it switched to the following day.
I can see that. I
don't know. Midnight changes or 2 a.m.
like
changes or whatever. I don't know.
Of.
Yeah.
See, I always set my live streams up sometime during the day of, and then do the announcements.
Something like that will be posted in community tab, like I did the other day for the Friday show and everything. So yeah. I would never just switch it for you guys unless there was some insane, like, if Phil comes out like tomorrow and's like, hey, listen, we got a ship date. And I'd be like, oh, okay, hey, we're gonna get together on a Thursday night. But
that's an emergency.
Yeah, it's emergency. That's fine, but you've got 3 or 4 ways to contact us. We would have known, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why that was such a weird thing. I'm like, no.
That Crocker.
You switch over. It's Crocker, Big Fall, and me, and you guys are like, wait a second, how is this even happening?
Breaking news.
Hey, yeah, Anna Flamingo's hosting the whole show. It would have just been, it was chaos. Chaos.
Yeah. We are waiting for the continuing ed certification before I go on one of those rants.
Yeah.
But it's coming.
Yeah, it should.
So I do have a couple of new videos I am working on. I'm working on a couple of small projects for next week, obviously, one I'm going to talk to you guys about after the show. And I am working on a Master System video. I realized as I was going through because I wanted to do another console one because it had been a while since I did one. I was looking at it and I'm like, you know what? That's realistically about the last major Sega console I need to cover. I should probably just cover that. So I'm going to start a little bit before that and go a little bit into their arcade history, which is incredibly muddled and confusing to a certain extent because it's like acquisition here, acquisition there, merger here, acquisition there. But I cover some of the details.
Hey, stay safe, Indy.
Thanks. Take care, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay safe, man. And then go into the Master System and kind of stop where the Genesis is going to come in because I already have videos on that and Dreamcast and Saturn. So I don't really need to cover those at this point.
That's another one, guys. If you guys haven't, I know you didn't even mention it, but the other video you did that was great was the TurboGrafx history of how
that one's very popular.
If you want to see a cool, like, I mean, if you're just starting to get into Nick's videos, or the Geek Storian videos, I should say, check out that one. That's one because I have a very soft spot for the TurboGrafx, so I absolutely love that.
I tried to stay fair to that one. I mean, they made a bunch of missteps, but
it was a terrible misstep.
It wasn't the hardware's fault. It was just
if they would have took that system and just brought it to the US instead of trying to hype it and change it and alter it, I think they would have been better. And their launch titles, if they would have had all their awesome launch titles and high-end titles that they had in Japan, I'm not saying every one of them, for the most part, there's so many from that library that they could have picked to start with in North America, and then they're like, well, here's biggest courage, you know.
Biggest problem is the same problem that Sega started to have, which is the Japanese side of the house really controlled everything that was going to come over, and they would not agree or really work with the American side as far as what could come over, or they wouldn't listen to them, right? They were not working together to make the console work here, right? Yeah. And Sega had that problem multiple times themselves. So it's not the only Japanese company to basically just tell the Americans they don't know their own market for whatever reason.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it. I think there's so many missteps that we can go and point out that Nintendo made or Sega made or Atari made that just do not get any coverage, because ultimately they were successful. Ultimately, if you've got a successful product and you're making money, no one is paying that much attention and scrutinizing all of the mistakes that you made. Those aren't coming out. Whereas the fate of the TurboGrafx 16 and NEC, or the fate of Sega in the later years, a lot of this stuff comes to detail and goes through intense scrutiny because it did fail. And there's a lot of articles written about that, and you get access to that after the fact. You don't have access. Nobody has access to what Nintendo was doing. There's only 3 or 4 journalists who have had access to Nintendo in Kyoto in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They just did not give that level of access. So you don't see the mistakes that they make. You see the mistakes that NEC and Hudson made with the TurboGrafx. You see the mistakes that Sega made because they collapsed, and a lot of those people came and they talked elsewhere about what happened.
Right.
But it's easy to say, like, they made this mistake. I think there's so much more to it.
There's a number of mistakes. It's just like one.
Yeah.
Right.
But you kind of get this narrative that, like, oh, the Japanese office was like they were never listening to the American office, and they were never knowing. They thought they knew the American audience better. With Sega, there was a ton of other stuff going on that Japan was trying to put out fires on their system, and with NEC as well, Hudson was never like the strong arm of that of that company, and they just did not have the power to do what they needed to do in the U.S. market. They were already coming in behind. They were already not making an impact, and they didn't have the money to make the splash that Sega ultimately could.
Well, and they were struggling the same way that everybody coming to the market was struggling with by fighting Nintendo at the time, which had a lot of non-compete agreements with third-party publishers. That bit both Sega and TurboGrafx when they tried to hit the market. They both struggled with that.
Right. And the problem was their potential audience of developers were on the PC, and the games on the PC were aimed at an older audience, so they didn't have, Sega ultimately ended up going with like EA, which was making computer games, and Activision, which was making computer games, but they didn't have games ready to go that were convertible from the PC.
Yeah, I heard that too.
To the TurboGrafx or the Master System or the Genesis. It took too long to kind of convert those. And where they made those ports, they were mediocre ports, because RPGs and flight simulators and battle tank simulators and all of those things that were popular on the PC did not translate very well to an 8-bit console or an early 16-bit console. It just took time.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, and that's a lot of it as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to actually, it's this. I just want.
Oh,
I know
30
No. Well, I was covering
so
things
much
at very
to
high
go in
level.
that.
I mean, if we want to go into the weeds of it, we can go into weeds for this for a whole show. And I'm
Yeah,
okay
the
with that,
weeds
for the record.
every day. Every day I want the weeds.
So, anyways, I'm gonna end it. But yeah, I appreciate it, guys. This was a fun discussion. I appreciate the chat really being on point on this. There's so many like crazy ports and disappointments and twists and betrayals and then now getting into like launches. I guess even launches you have some twists, you know. So next week I have a couple topics I'm going to talk to these guys about, but I'm just going to mention this, but I would love the chat for next week. I know one of my topics I definitely want to talk about is the oddest things, whether it be in gaming. And I'm not talking about like a peripheral or anything like that, but I'm talking about like the oddest video game you've ever experienced, or something in a video game where it be a boss battle, an enemy, just something that's so strange, similar to like we were talking about the Ring King. Like, what was that? What's the weirdest, oddest thing you've experienced in your video gaming throughout the years? So chat, if you could like join us next week and kind of bring that to the table and get some answers. And I think the three of us come up with at least three really strange things that we've seen or experienced in our gaming over the years. And then we'll talk about some other topics as well. But
let's say YouTube comes to mind.
Yeah, I'd say that's the strangest thing ever. It's the weirdest and most. I don't get me started. But anyways, thank you so much. We will see you back here next week. I'm pretty sure there's no holidays or weird things happening, so we'll see you back next week for some more gaming fun.
Monday, 3 a.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, it'll be exactly. Remember,
Luke,
it's
just
always
you.
Wednesdays. Thank you, Luke. Wherever you are, sir. Wherever you are, we're thinking about you.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with Luke tonight. Normally, he's
I hope he's all right, man.
I talked to him this afternoon. He's fine.
I'm sure he's fine. He's probably just busy right now.
But anyway, back on topic.
He's got a life.
Thank you, chat.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you, Bacon Ice Cream. We gotta have you back on, man.
Hey, Rich.
Maybe I'll get a hold of you. See if you. I also want to. I was going to mention to Creep when he was here earlier. I really wanted to have him on again as well. I want to do something together for our 75th, but I definitely got to get the level 857 guys on. So I don't know if that'll be on our 75th or maybe the show after. We will see, but I definitely want to get those on. It'll be a full show, but we'll have so much to talk about. It'll be so much fun. But anyways, we'll see you next week, guys. Thank you so much. Take care.